Among the endless plains of Asia, a boy was born, wrapped in a dark omen. He clutched a clot of blood in his small hands, a sign that his future would be marked by war and conquest. His name was Temüjin, and his father, Yasujii, was a tribal leader of the Borjigin Mongols. In a land where survival was dictated by strength and cunning, this boy had no idea that he was destined to change the course of history. Yasujii was a respected man among the Mongol clans, but his untimely death would plunge his family into oblivion. Poisoned by the Tatars, their ancestral enemies, he left behind a widow and young children, with no allies or protection. The destiny that once whispered promises of greatness now carried the winds of adversity. Cast out by their own tribe, Temüjin and his family were abandoned to the harsh laws of the steppe, where only the strong survived. It was there that the forging of the universal ruler began. Hunger was an invisible but relentless enemy. With Yasujii's death, the Borjigin tribe no longer saw a reason to support his family. Holun, Temüjin's mother, refused to submit, teaching her children to find food and survive in the arid lands of Mongolia. They fished in frozen rivers, hunted small animals, and learned to live with the bare minimum. Misery shaped Temüjin, but it did not break him. His eyes, once filled with fear, began to reflect something new: determination. However, survival depended not only on enduring the hostile environment but also on facing his own family. Among the brothers, disputes were inevitable. The eldest, Begtur, began to impose his will on Temüjin and the others, taking for himself the little food they managed to find. The tension grew, and on a silent night, Temüjin made a decision that would change his destiny forever. Armed with a crude bow, he and his brother Kasar killed Begtur, thus securing his position as the leader of the family. There was no room for weakness. Life on the steppe did not forgive the indecisive. Temüjin learned early on that survival required ruthlessness. Begtur's death not only ensured another night without hunger, but also marked the beginning of his journey toward power. The abandoned child was becoming a leader, and the echoes of his future rise were already forming in the icy winds of Mongolia. Winter punished the Mongolian steppes, and survival was a constant struggle. For Temüjin, the threat came not only from the cold and hunger but also from enemies who lurked, watching his rise. During one of his incursions, he was captured by the Teyikiad, a rival tribe that saw him as a growing danger. Imprisoned and humiliated, he was chained and treated as a slave. His captors believed they could break his will, but they underestimated his unshakable determination. For months, Temüjin remained under strict watch, patiently waiting for an opportunity. He would not be broken. One night, a careless guard gave him the chance he had been waiting for. With the cunning that would follow him throughout his life, he used the shadows to his advantage, struck silently, and fled into the darkness of the steppe. Wounded and exhausted, he sought refuge among his father's former allies, who took him in and cared for him. The young man who returned from slavery was no longer the same. Now, every blow he had suffered became a reminder of the necessity of power. He would never be a prisoner again. Freedom brought Temüjin a new determination. He needed allies, but more than that, he needed an army. In his quest for power, he found crucial support in Togrul, leader of the Karates, who had been a friend of his father. With this alliance, he began gathering followers, promising not only survival but glory and conquest. Among his allies was Jamukha, a childhood friend who shared his ambitions. United, they launched their first campaign to consolidate power. But fate would soon test his leadership. When the Merkits, an enemy tribe, kidnapped Borte, his wife and greatest confidant, Temüjin found himself facing his first great trial. To rescue her, he would need to unite his forces with those of Togrul and Jamukha and confront a well-established enemy. Under his command, thousands of Mongol horsemen charged against the Merkits in a devastating assault that caught the tribe off guard. The clash of blades and the thunder of hooves echoed across the steppe as the Mongols annihilated their opponents. In the end, Borte was rescued, and the victory cemented Temüjin's reputation as a formidable commander. But the war also taught him that alliances were fragile. His bond with Jamukha, though strong, bore signs of future rivalry. The path to greatness was set, but it would be paved with blood, betrayals, and battles that would test both his vision and his brutality. Temüjin's rise had begun, and there was no turning back. The victory over the Merkits established Temüjin as a respected leader. Temüjin advocated for a meritocratic system, where warriors were promoted based on skill rather than lineage. This clashed with Jomukha's traditional ideals, which favored tribal nobility and the old Mongol hierarchy. As his forces grew, the differences between them became irreconcilable. The tension reached its peak when Jomukha, feeling threatened, broke the alliance and gathered his own followers. The battlefield was set, the vast plains of Dalan Baljit. The clash was fierce, and at first, Temüjin's warriors held the advantage. However, Jomukha proved to be a cunning commander and managed to turn the tide, massacring many of Temüjin's followers. Defeated and forced to flee, Temüjin learned a bitter lesson. To triumph, it was not enough to be a great warrior. One had to be a superior strategist. While his enemies celebrated his temporary downfall, he vowed to rebuild his army with even greater discipline and loyalty. The lost battle was only a setback in his inevitable rise. The following years were spent rebuilding and learning. Exiled, Temüjin wandered the steppes, studying the mistakes that had led to his defeat. During this time, he developed new military strategies and strengthened his alliances. His goal was not just to gather an army but to transform it into an unstoppable war machine. In his quest for power, he adopted an innovative approach. Instead of relying solely on the nobility, he recruited warriors from various backgrounds, promoting them based on talent and loyalty. He created a strict code of discipline, where absolute obedience and military efficiency were rewarded, while betrayal was punished with exemplary brutality. With a renewed and more organized army, he began his campaign to reclaim control over the steppes. One by one, the clans that had turned against him were either subdued or destroyed. His fame grew, and with it, fear among his enemies. This time, there would be no room for concessions. When he finally returned to face Jomukha, the balance of power had shifted. His new warfare strategy, based on speed, ambushes, and unwavering discipline, proved superior. In a decisive battle, Jomukha was defeated and captured. In an unexpected gesture, Temüjin offered him clemency, allowing him to become an ally. However, Jomukha refused to live under his former friend's shadow and chose death. With his greatest rival out of the way, Temüjin solidified his position as the supreme leader of the Mongol tribes. But his ambition was not limited to Mongolia. His gaze was already set beyond the steppes, toward the empires that awaited him. The year 1206 marked a decisive moment in the history of the steppes. After years of battles, alliances, and betrayals, Temüjin emerged as the undisputed ruler of Mongolia. Uniting the clans under a single banner, he adopted the title of Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. The ceremony took place on the banks of the Onon River, where tribal chiefs swore loyalty to him, recognizing his supremacy. It was the beginning of an empire unlike anything the world had ever seen. Genghis Khan knew that maintaining his position required more than just military strength. He implemented a series of administrative and military reforms that transformed Mongolia into an organized power. He abolished the old tribal divisions and created a system based on loyalty to the Mongol state. His army was divided into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 men, ensuring discipline and efficiency. Additionally, he established an effective communication system, the YAM, which allowed for the rapid transmission of messages across the vast territory. With the tribes finally unified, he turned his attention beyond the steppes. The neighboring kingdoms and empires despised the Mongols, treating them as uncultured barbarians. Little did they know that the newly proclaimed Genghis Khan was about to change that perception forever. The first test of the unified Mongol army came in 1209 when Genghis Khan turned against the Western Xia kingdom, located in northwest China. The Xia ruler, confident in the superiority of his fortresses and armies, ignored the Mongols' initial requests for submission. Genghis Khan responded with a swift and devastating attack. Crossing the Gobi Desert, the Mongols surprised the Xia, using siege tactics learned from Chinese prisoners. Instead of directly attacking the walls, they isolated the cities, cut off supplies, and forced surrender through exhaustion. Mongol military skills, especially their coordinated use of cavalry and efficient battlefield communication, proved fatal for their enemies. After months of fighting, the Western Xia kingdom surrendered and became a vassal state. But Genghis Khan was not satisfied. His sights were now set on a much larger and more powerful enemy: the Jin dynasty, rulers of northern China. With an army strengthened by the experience of the Xia campaign, the Mongols were ready for an even greater challenge. The invasion of China would not be just a war of conquest but a demonstration of a new world order. The Mongols were no longer just steppe nomads. They were an unstoppable force, forged by war and led by a man whose name would echo through the ages. Genghis Khan was not content with minor victories. He wanted an empire worthy of his ambition. The victory over the Western Xia and the Jin solidified Genghis Khan as a relentless conqueror. But in 1218, he encountered an enemy that would awaken his wrath like no other: the Khwarezmian Empire. Located in Persia and ruled by the arrogant Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad, this empire controlled the trade routes of Central Asia. Initially, Genghis Khan sought a peaceful agreement, sending ambassadors and merchants to establish relations. However, the Shah, fearing the Mongols, betrayed this attempt at alliance and ordered the massacre of the envoys. To Genghis Khan, this act was not just an affront but a declaration of war. The Mongol leader gathered his forces and set out for the complete destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire. Using psychological terror tactics, his troops advanced like a storm, besieging and burning entire cities. No opponent was spared, and the devastation was so complete that, years later, travelers still found piles of human skulls in the ruins of the destroyed cities. The Shah fled in desperation, unable to resist the Mongol advance. Pursued to the far reaches of his empire, he died in exile, abandoned even by his own allies. The empire that once dominated the trade routes was reduced to ashes. The message was clear: no one defied Genghis Khan with impunity. After the destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire, Genghis Khan continued his expansion. His domains stretched from China to Persia, a colossal empire built on fear and military discipline. But the conqueror, now an aging man, knew that his journey was coming to an end. In 1227, during a campaign against the Tanguts, he was gravely wounded. The exact circumstances of his death remain shrouded in mystery. Some accounts say he fell from his horse, while others speak of an infection or an unknown illness. Before dying, he ordered that his body be buried in secret, in an unknown location in the steppes. His men followed his instructions to the letter, killing anyone who crossed the funeral procession's path to ensure that the burial site would never be revealed. And so, the great conqueror disappeared into the same vastness that had witnessed his birth. His legacy, however, would endure for centuries. His sons and grandsons expanded the Mongol Empire even further, bringing it to the peak of its territorial reach. The impact of his conquests resonated not only in military affairs but also in trade, politics, and culture. The Silk Road flourished under Mongol rule, and his system of governance influenced generations of leaders. Was Genghis Khan a hero or a villain? History refuses to define him in absolute terms. To some, he was the scourge of God, responsible for millions of deaths. To others, he was a visionary who shaped the modern world. But one thing is certain: his name will never be forgotten. Did you enjoy the story? Then don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want more epic narratives like this, activate the notification bell to receive alerts whenever we post new content. Your support is essential to keep bringing fascinating stories from the past. Share with your friends and help us keep the memory of history's great figures alive.